Hello, everyone. Welcome to the session today. This week, we've got a focus on male mental health, and I want to introduce who I am. I'm Anthony, and I'm a sign language teacher. I teach BSL, and the I also have a male interpreter with me today, so he'll be translating from sign language into spoken English for me, and vice versa. So hopefully, you'll all understand me. So you're all very welcome, especially those who come regularly. But this is the first time. But you're all very welcome if it is your first time. I'm based in Belfast, and today the weather is. We always talk about the weather in Belfast. So the weather is a bit kind of grey today. It's a bit dull, and there is no sun today, unfortunately. So we have to wait really for the sun to come. So hopefully the sun will be on its way and we'll have a beautiful summer and the temperature will soar. Uh, I did look at my phone and it said it's going to be 22 next week. So I'm not sure if that is actually going to be true or not, but it, uh, it says on my phone. So I've got high hopes that the weather will improve. So I hope you are all well. And I've got some plans today in terms of the session. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be teaching some BSL, some vocabulary linked to men's mental health. And also there'll be some stories kind of interlinked in regards to mental health. And what I'll do is I'll talk about my journey. Won't be in full, don't worry, but it'll be sort of like snippets of my life. And if you've got any questions, then put them in the comments and I'm happy to reply to them. But more importantly, that by the end of today's session, people will have a greater understanding of mental health in regards to deafness. Okay, so good morning. Oh, it's sunny there with you. Oh, lovely. That is good. Yes, you should bring it over to Belfast then. Yeah, and yes, I remember. I know the area where you're from in England. Yes, that's true. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to be teaching some vocabulary to begin with, and then I'll talk about some snippets of information. So this is the sign for men. Men. I'll do the sign for women as well, but that's the sign for woman, and man. So mental health, two parts. Mental health. Okay, mental health week. So Men's Mental Health Week. That's the sign for week. This is Yeah, we talk about the duration of a week. There is the W for week, but it's also sort of like the duration of the time that the week lasts is how the sign works. So we'll do that again. Men's Mental Health Week. Okay, one more time, and I'll switch my voice off. Okay, this is the sign for women. So you've got the sign for men, and this is the sign for woman. And I will put down the vocabulary as well that we've covered. Emotions, 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 feelings. So do your hand like that and use your middle finger. And put them on your torso and pull it up. Feelings, emotion, feeling, emotion, feeling. So the sign for mind would be this. Mind, mind. I'll do a few more later, but what I'll do is I'll explain sort of um, mental health from a deaf perspective, because it's very important that we talk about these things and that people get the opportunity to get things off their chest, talk about their struggles, um, how how they experience things in the deaf community in terms of barriers and things like that. So one of the main barrier within the deaf community would be communication. And communication is pivotal to everything. So within the deaf community, our primary language will be sign language. It's not for everyone, and I will explain that, but it'll help you understand some of the issues that surround this. I was born deaf and I'm profoundly deaf. So I have a deaf identity, and speech doesn't feature for me because, it's not linked to being able to hear things. So it means then that your brain needs to work out how to receive the information. So the deaf community, when they receive information, they get that visually. So yourselves, when you speak, use the phone, and your communication would be like that. But moderately deaf people, they would receive their information a little bit like hearing people almost, and they would get their information in the same way. They'd be able to use the phone, they'd be able to speak and lip read and things like that. So they are a specialist group in terms of their communication. So in terms of like background noises and things like that, they have to be controlled, but otherwise they are able to bring all that together for themselves. And in terms of communication, when you meet a deaf person, some deaf people, you will be able to talk to them and converse with them, and other deaf people, they may struggle and just do visual gestures, body language, and find other ways to communicate. Maybe write things down, use your mobile phone and do text, bring an interpreter in for the communication of sign language, and work out ways to support one another in that. If you imagine that you're in a workplace and you're in an office where, obviously you have to get on with your work, the matter in hand of doing the work, but then every now and then, things, um, chit chat in the office, jokes, stories, little bits of snippets of information, and just important information from management in the office. This is going to be happening. Please make sure that this. Deaf people often miss that element and all of those elements. So it's kind of like all the chit chat that goes on in an office environment, they often miss. And sometimes people don't realize how important that is for your well-being, because you're focusing on your work, which is what you're there for, but you're missing out on all of the social aspects of everything that's going on in the environment, and that can affect you, especially if you're profoundly deaf, because you will miss all of that. If an interpreter's brought in, they would be able to, inform the deaf person what's going on, and that's brilliant. But um, sometimes it's better to get it in a natural way, where sometimes interpreters are brought in and it's then relayed then from the interpreter to the deaf person. And so the chit chat in an office environment, I often think, is very important. Um, there's the community, there's kind of like, education. You think of all the different areas where you talk to people in your daily lives. Imagine a deaf person kind of missing out on that all of the time, and that does have its effect. So that links into mental health, and that links into general well-being, because we have to kind of make sure that we work hard in order to kind of like feed our energies. We have to actually make sure that we kind of are immersed in the society that we belong in. So, in the same way, that you have tea and coffee to replenish yourself, that chit chat I often find replenishes you. And it's kind of like if you miss out on that, you're missing out on your fuel. You're missing out on everything that's going on around you. And like, hearing people can do that. Hearing people can also learn sign language, and that is an amazing thing. And so if you have any questions, please type them in and I'll respond to them. Okay. So we're going to go back to a little bit more vocabulary, and I'm going to teach some vocab. This is the sign for sad. 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 Depressed. There are regional signs for this one, but this is the one that we use here. Depressed. There's this sign that's used predominantly in England. Depressed, where your mood is suppressed. Your mood is low. Or this one. Depressed. Angry or anger. Anger. And also aggressiveness. That's the sign for aggressive. In the same way, it's the same sign. And then that's where your lip patterns come in. Angry, anger, and aggressive. Anger would be this, and aggressive is that one. Mood. This is the same for mood. Good mood, bad mood. Up and down. A bit like a roller coaster. So your highs and your lows. Highs and lows. Up and down. Like a roller coaster would be. Mood. Mood. So this is the time for trauma. 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 Support. Support. One-to-one. One-to-one. Group. So in terms of the support, group support, one-to-one support, team. It's the same sign as team. So group would be the same sign as team. So one-to-one and group. One-to-one support, group support. Okay, so I'm going to repeat those. Sad, sad. Depressed. And again, depressed. Anger, anger, ag- aggressive, aggressive, mood, mood, trauma, trauma, support, support, one to one, one to one, group, group. Okay, so going back to mental health again within the deaf community. So the deaf community means not just deaf people. It could mean hard of hearing people. It could mean people who suffer from tinnitus or those who have a hearing loss. And that all makes up the deaf community. It's all equally important. And during my work, I cover an awful lot of workshops, and it's really interesting the conversations that I have with people and the questions they ask me. And sometimes they'll say about the difficulties of deafness. And growing up as a deaf person, everyone's experiences are different, but mine kind of like I just got very used to it. Sometimes it is very difficult for hearing people to learn sign language who who have become deafened. And so hearing people who've grown up listening to sound all of their life and then they lose their hearing, that can be quite difficult. That is hard for them because they've got used to experiencing all of their information through sound and living in what we would call a hearing environment. That is particularly difficult. Whereas if you've always been deaf and you've lived around deafness, it's very different. But to grow up in a hearing environment and then all of a sudden lose your hearing, that is very difficult. People who experience tinnitus, that is sort of like noises. They constantly hear noises that are not external. So they often have to have sounds that block out the noises. So like music and things like that, because they would experience maybe sounds that would be equivalent to a very noisy aeroplane, uh, kind of like machinery noises, and that can be very difficult. One of the important things is to talk about what you're going through, I find, and that is vital. That is really important because if you get to know people's experiences, that helps them rather than them holding on to things. And especially if we're talking about men, it's something that we as men do in Belfast. When we meet one another within the deaf community, we often have conversations about all sorts of different things. And I find that very important. It's really important to talk to people about what you're going through. I go around teaching deaf awareness and I raise awareness. And often the expectation would be, how you communicate with a deaf person. So, for example, if you meet a deaf person and, don't panic is the main thing. It's important to know how to communicate with a deaf person, how not to be rude, how to conduct yourself in a particular way. And that's what I do in my deaf awareness sessions to give people a wider understanding of how to communicate with deaf people and give them the communication tips to actually have successful interactions with deaf people in terms of communication. We talk about deaf culture and we also talk about hearing culture and how sometimes they can be very different. And deaf people use facial expressions to a greater extent. They wave more. They tap one another on the shoulder for attention. They would kind of like maybe bang the table or bang the floor for the vibrations to pass through the floor. They use lights to get attention. That's all of the cultural elements that deaf people use. And hearing people are often taken aback a little bit because they think, "Oh God, I wouldn't think of flashing a light to get somebody's attention," that kind of thing. So they have to adjust the way that you communicate in order to make it successful. But that's something that's intrinsic of a deaf person. It's something that you don't have to teach them because they would just automatically just tap you on the shoulder. And if you're not used to that as a hearing person, that can be a bit of a culture shock. So in the deaf awareness sessions that I run, I give people an understanding you will get touched on the shoulder to get their attention, or waved at, or you know, each country has its own culture. So, and but that's wonderful. That's what makes us all rich and vibrant, isn't it? So it's kind of, that's why I want to pass on my culture to people. People say, why do deaf people keep tapping you and touching you? Because obviously you don't shout to get your attention, or you don't shout to get their attention. So in order to get their attention, you have to tap them on the shoulder. Don't shout at a deaf person. And it is what in the deaf world very rude. It's viewed as rude to shout at people generally, but in terms of deaf people, there is a hearing way of doing things and a deaf way of doing things. But culturally, it's intrinsic in the way that deaf people do things, and tapping on the shoulder or touching them, on the upper body, that is acceptable. At the time, she's my wife now, but she was my girlfriend at the time, and I was introduced to her mum, and I was incredibly nervous. It was the first time that I'd met her mum, and I visited her house, and went in. It was a lovely house, and it was all very tidy and everything in place, and there were some candles in place, and the candles were lit because it was actually quite dark in the room. Her mum absolutely loves music, so she had this nice ambient setting, and it's kind of like I couldn't quite work out with my hearing aid what was going on, but I sat opposite her and tried to communicate. She didn't sign. She didn't understand sign language, so I was trying really hard to communicate with her, but it was quite dark. And and there was kind of like the odd lamp in different spots of the room, but even still, I just could not quite see. And I kind of walked over to the light, switched the light on, the full big light as we call it, and it's kind of like, and my mother-in-law, she thought, how rude is that to go into somebody's house and start adjusting their lighting system? And it's kind of like, and she got a bit annoyed. And I said, it was very hard for me to communicate with you. My wife was, she thought it was hilarious. So she explained, to her mum why he just literally went and did that. But I remember at the time thinking there was a clash of cultures because she had this lovely music playing with candles and things like that. And boom, I banged the light on in order to communicate. So I'm going to go back to a little bit more vocabulary. Culture, culture, culture. Love, love. Confidence, confidence. Low confidence or fluctuating confidence. So you can see literally the way that the sign is used. If it comes up, you're gaining confidence. If it goes down, you're losing confidence. That kind of thing. I've lost my confidence completely, it would plummet. Whereas if you're gaining confidence, it would come from below and rise right up. And if it's kind of fluctuating, it would kind of literally move in a constant sign. Does that make sense? That's the way sign language works. Positive, positive, negative, negative, nurse, nurse, doctor, So there are regional differences between the sign for doctor, but this is our sign. Northern Ireland sign would be doctor. So, but you can see it comes from the pulse. So in Scotland and Wales, the sign would be doctor, doctor. Medication, medication, medication. Family, family. Friends, friends. And again, there are regional signs. Some people use this sign for friends, friends, friends. Okay, so there's two different sounds and often they do vary. So I'll go through those again. Love, love, confidence, confidence, low confidence. I've lost my confidence. My confidence fluctuates. Positive, positive, negative, negative, nurse, nurse, doctor, doctor, or this sign for doctor in Northern Ireland, doctor. Medication, medication, family, family, friends, friends, or this sign for friends. Okay, so back to the deaf community and mental health. Some people think, why is sign language not widely used, as popular as. So I'm going to give you a little bit of history. In 1880, there was a conference in Milan, and professionals who were involved with deaf education decided that they believed that the best way to educate deaf children was through a method called oralism. And they believed if they used sign language, it would damage reading and speech and have a detrimental effect on it. So that would stop deaf children integrating into mainstream society and therefore, reading and writing. And it was a very dark time within the deaf community because as a result of that conference, sign language was banned and it affected everything. There was a cascade of effect that deaf people struggled in everyday environments like school and university had no access for them because they had to try and lip read everything that was being said, and sometimes the maximum amount of time that you can lip read somebody for in terms of concentration is an hour. So therefore had no access to their full day's lecture or things like that. To be able to concentrate on somebody lip reading infinitely would be so difficult, and therefore it was be very, very difficult to work out what people were saying. It's kind of there was no context to anything that people were saying. So you often had to try and make up, and you had no space in your head to try and work that out and fathom what somebody was talking about. So as a result, deaf people often were left behind, both socially and educationally. There was a high percentage of 16-year-olds when leaving school that they had a reading age of a 9-year-old, equivalent to a hearing 9-year-old. So it showed you how behind they were in terms of their access. But that covered, and it cascaded into other elements as well. And in America, research has proven that education and the use of sign language, ASL, because in America they would use ASL. It's very different to BSL, and it is very different. It's a different language. So when I talk about American Sign Language, I'll talk about ASL. And then they realized that the ASL language was so varied, so deep, it was linguistically a bona fide language, and it was equivalent to any other language, any other spoken language. It had every element of language that spoken languages had. So slowly over time, it then started to get the recognition again, and things started to come back, and people then started recognizing sign language as an official language. And in quite recently, 2023, it's been recognized as a sign language, as an official language, and so therefore the support then comes with it, and um, all of the access that is included in that comes with it. So it's about getting the right kind of support, the right kind of access, in the right place, in terms of television and subtitles. And because in the past, when I was younger, there was absolutely no subtitles on television. You know, wasn't when I was 18 and 19, when trying to watch television, there was absolutely nothing. My brother and I, because my brother is 1 year older than me, and he was, all of his friends, he would come together, and they I used to like watching The Simpsons because it was nice and visual and I could follow it. But he used to watch Friends because it was just so accessible to him. And it's kind of, as a hearing person, and I just think it was so difficult watching television, and kind of like we used to fight because he wanted to watch Friends at the same time that I wanted to watch The Simpsons, and it was kind of like we were at loggerheads with one another because it's kind of like it's the only thing I can watch. You can watch anything. There was one time we, we ended up in hospital because there was blood everywhere, but that's a completely different story. So, I'm missing someone. Sorry, let's go back. So when subtitles then started coming out, um, I started watching Friends, and I thought, what a good program! What a good program! I actually got access to it, and I could actually follow the acting and then look at the subtitles below, and it's kind of like, and I thought, look at all the times that we were fighting, it was just ridiculous. But there you go. So now we're in the 21st century. Sign language is widespread, and access is so much better, and people are taking the opportunities now. We have VRS, a video relay service, where you can contact interpreters, and deaf people have access to mainstream services. We've got like 999 BSL. Deaf people can be more independent and ring through and just say, you know, I want this. I need to know that. Whereas, kind of in days gone by, you used to have to run next door to your neighbour and ask them to, would you phone the doctor for me? Would you phone an ambulance? And whereas now you can independently do these things now with the access that's provided. I play a lot of sport, and when I was growing up, I played tennis, and I played to quite a high level. I played for Ireland, and I played for a mainstream club as well, and, I was the only deaf person in Ireland playing to that level, and communication wasn't easy. But when I'm playing tennis, it was a leveler. When I was on the court, I felt equal to the person that I was playing, whereas off the court, it was a different story altogether. I would struggle to in order to communicate with people. But when I was in a competition with somebody on the court playing tennis, it was a complete leveler. And so that was why I enjoyed it so much. I got involved in deaf sports and the Deaf Olympics and European Championships and World Championships for the deaf. Really, really enjoyed it. Went all over the world, met so many different people, different athletics from different athletes from different countries, and it was kind of like you could just see everybody's different identity. It was just so interesting. So I don't play tennis so much now as I'm getting older, but um, there is a different sport called paddle, and a lot of people haven't actually even heard of it, but it's very popular in Spain, in sort of like Mediterranean countries, and squash. It's very similar to squash, and it's kind of like whereas they have like a glass court, and it's fantastic. It's a brilliant sport. So I thought I would try it, and in January, I was quite nervous because, I didn't know anybody when I arrived, kept saying hello to everybody. I was incredibly nervous. And luckily, when they realized that I was deaf, I said, "Yeah, I'm struggling with information," and I kind of like was playing on my phone, trying to communicate with them. I'm used to doing that. I'm used to doing that. But about a week later, a couple of weeks later, in fact, um, different people kept coming up to me and saying, "Hello, good afternoon." And they were signing to me, and I thought, "Oh my goodness, hello." And they were doing the sign for hello, how are you? And I was taken aback, and I responded, obviously, and I said, and then they were giving me their name in sign language, and I thought, it just completely made my day. Completely made my day because, all of my life, when I look back at how, communication has been such a difficult thing, and then all of a sudden now to be put yourself forward, go to a club, and now the people are learning sign language in order to accommodate me in that club. It is absolutely amazing. It's kind of like much more acceptance than ever there used to be when I was growing up. So it's kind of like, you know, uh, everybody had to speak, everybody had to communicate through spoken language. So it was kind of like, right. So we're going to go back to a bit more vocabulary. So I'm going to do some vocabulary on what we've already learned. So the sign for man, man. So Men's Mental Health Week. Men's Mental Health Week. Women, women or woman. Emotions, emotions. Feelings, feelings. Mind, mind. Sad, sad. Depressed, depressed. And in Northern Ireland, the sign would be depressed. Anger, angry, aggressive, aggressive, mood, mood, mood. Good mood, bad mood. Good, bad, good, bad. Trauma, trauma. Support, support. One to one, one to one. Group, group. Love, love. Confidence, confidence. Lack of confidence, lack of confidence. Positive, positive. Negative, negative. Nurse, nurse. Doctor, doctor. Or in Northern Ireland, doctor, doctor. Communication, communication. To keep things to yourself, to hold things confidentially, keep things to yourself. So in terms of men's mental health, people would hold in their information, to keep hold of their own information, give out that information, start talking to people and tell them what you're experiencing. So holding it in, getting it off your chest. Medication, medication. Family, family. Friends, friends. Or this time for friend, friends. Okay, so before we finish, one of the important things to remember when you meet a deaf person, you come across a deaf person, and if they're a sign language user and you are struggling to communicate with them, just say hello initially. Say hello. Hello. How are you? How are you? How are you? Can I help? Can I help? Do you want to talk? Do you want to talk? So it's time for want and then talk. Do you want to talk? One of the important thing is coffee. Coffee is a must. Coffee or tea. Tea. Have a chat with coffee and tea. Okay. I want to say thank you to everybody for joining me, coming in and learning some BSL here with me this morning and a little bit of deaf awareness in terms of the the deaf community. Thank you very much for your time. And I want to say thank you to the Royal Voluntary Service for allowing me this opportunity to give some deaf awareness session to you this morning in relation to men's mental health in the deaf community. I'd like to thank the interpreter, and I hope you all have a fantastic weekend, and I may see you again soon another time. Thank you very much. Bye bye. Is that out? Am I out? How do I come out?